This is a book talk for the reign of books, the reader's entry into great narratives. We're talking about Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. This book is steampunkish, fantasy-ish. It is a lot of things to a lot of people. 5 stars for me, 3.5 stars for my co-host, John Keel. And
that's right. Prepare to be crisis engineered, you.
The Crisis Engine. This is a spoiler book talk, so all bets are off starting right now. The Crisis Engine is the Isaac, our protagonist. He's a scientist, and the science gets wacky and weird, and crisis theory is part of that. But it's not boring science. No, sir. This book, John, I gave it 5 stars because it opens up with a stranger, a ominous figure, into this decrepit, exotic, very alien city that is the setting and is as much a character. New Crobuzon is as much a character as any of the phenomenal ensemble cast in this book. So I'm sold right away. Maybe this is my weird quirks or about what I like, but there's a bunch of different sentient species in this book. The main scientist with all the crazy wacky theories is hooked up with a bug girl, and she starts working for a weird mafia boss that's a re-engineered, remade mutant type thing, and he has control over the drug trade. So it's science, it's mafia stuff, it's corrupt, repressive governments, it's crazy mythology, steampunk, and all kinds of weirdness. So it's got a lot going, and guess what? For me, I thought it was a gorgeous book. Didn't know where it was going. You know, the setup is complex, great character study, all organic, all original for me. Then it shoots off another direction, which we'll talk about. But what did you think about the book?
This was one of the most unique stories that I have ever read. The language and the writing that the author used was fantastic. It was rich. The thing I noted the most was that he took his time developing the characters. And the first 9 chapters of this book, okay, were these characters waking up in the morning, talking to each other, cooking breakfast, and then heading off to work. That was the first 9 chapters of the book, because in between all that going on, you were learning some of the background and some of the history, but I felt like I knew these characters really well. This book should be studied for the character development that the author put into it. So it was a wonderful story. The language was great. The action scenes were top-notch when he finally got to it. And I also want to mention the pacing of the book. He was so methodical about building the characters, and then even some of the action scenes went on and on. Sometimes it felt like it droned on and on, but I don't hold that against the book because it was each action scene was well developed. He took his time to give you all the details of what happened so it would all make sense. The reason I gave it 3.5 stars, Josh, is because there were a couple of concepts the author had in the book. And like I said in our full-length review, which you should watch on thereignofbooks.com, it felt like he was jamming a square peg into a round hole. And he really bashed it in there, and it worked. But there was something not quite right about it. For instance, the Crisis Engine. And we can talk a little more about that later. But 3.5 stars, read the book. I do recommend that you read the book. Just understand from my perspective, there were some things that didn't quite work right for me.
Well, you know, it was totally different. You know, people talk about world building, and he took his time to, again, create a world that wasn't just cosmetic window dressing. It was deep. It was disturbing. This book is rated R, maybe rated X in some periods. It's very mature in the themes and the relationships and the decisions. Everything fit. You know, we talked about each scene that introduced so many characters. You thought you could easily get overwhelmed, but one of the incredible things about this book is you have this core cast of characters: Isaac the scientist, Lynn the art sculptor, bug-headed girlfriend. She's called a Kepri. That's her species, and you understand cultural differences. All of this is seeped in those first 9 chapters, and then you start to find out. You know, the main plot is, you know, finding out this problem to a long-standing scientific question, and the reason Isaac is inspired is because a Garuda, flying birdman, basically the Garuda named Yagaric.
Oh, wait a minute, Josh. Birdman. I just want to throw that in there because that's what he was.
Birdman, pop culture reference 101 from Johnny. Yeah, but the Birdman is no longer a flying Birdman. It's pretty grotesque. He was punished. His wings were ripped off. But that real world problem kind of inspired Isaac, plus all the gold he got, to actually find a way to make this man
all the gold he took and spent, but never actually produced a solution for this poor Garuda.
Hey, it's not his fault.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
But it's a valid point. But there's something a little bit higher than scientific discovery that happens. It was kind of like survival and not dying. So that he had to kind of accomplish that. So the scientific discovery got put on the back burner. But
and Josh, I would also like to mention that the author created some very obvious social commentary. And we commented again in the full-length podcast on therandombooks.com, which you should listen to, that it's really easy to do that when you're willing to write a book that has so many extremes in it. Okay, so having a human male with a female that's got a scarab head, okay, but a female body, right? It creates such a drastic difference that it's really easy to bring some social commentary up to the surface. And there was quite a bit of that in here, and it's all relevant to today, and you'll pick it up immediately, but it was done intelligently, and I enjoy these extremes. The story was so unique in that way. Back to you, Josh.
And you actually pay attention. I was the same way. I would not read this if it didn't have that fantastical element, if it didn't have these crazy imagined scenarios and species who are dealing with the same issues we are. It wouldn't interest me as much. That's just this is how I get my social commentary dosage. But all the different species are introduced at different times. Some only have one scene, but China Mieville is a master at sucking every ounce of those scenes, and they move the plot forward. And they show the richness of the city, and there's too many not aliens, but different species to even mention. We'll throw in a couple of the favorite ones. But what the book is about, essentially, when it comes down to it, is this indestructible monster, this biological nature's freak of nature that comes, and without any predators to fight it, it has a whole city on which to feed and breed and basically decimate. And this is the coolest alien or monster since Alien and since our other favorite, the Shrike.
Hey, you know what, Josh? I don't want to see Superman versus Batman or Captain America versus Iron Man. I want to see Slakemoth versus Shrike. And you know what? Let's throw in the Alien, too.
Oh, yeah. I will pay to see that. And by the way, there's no Captain America versus Iron Man, but I would pay to see that.
There will be. It's called the Civil War. Giving me some geek cred.
I will only watch Slakemoth versus Alien versus Predator if the Jim Henson Company takes over all three properties. I want to see Jim Henson Muppets go at it. But anyway,
Dark Crystal Slakemoths.
I think out of everything I loved about this book, if it had been if it had been more of a subtle story about discovery, relationships, I would have liked it. But the literal crisis of having these indestructible beasties that have multidimensional hypnotic wings that no sentient being can look away from. They're hypnotized, and then they essentially drink your dreams, drink your consciousness, and lobotomize you, kill you. And there's no coming back because they've basically sucked your sentience out of you. It's pretty freaky, pretty scary. Government tries to clamp down on it. Government doesn't want anybody to know about it because they were experimenting on these creatures. Cliche-ish, but very unique, very original in this story insofar as how all the elements, again, organically come together into one whole that was just, I was eating up the whole time. I mean, it got freaky weird. It got really freaky weird. People die, people come along.
And, Josh, if the government gets a chance to recapture these things and continue studying them, even though they can't control them, they will do it. What an overused trope.
But it shows you, it reinforces government stereotypes too, right? I mean, these guys can't invent or create anything original. They just have to, they have to sell it to the highest bidder, whatever DoD experiments they hack together. So, who's gonna save them? It's not the government. That's another social commentary. The government will never save you. That's a different podcast. That's not this podcast. You have to go out and save yourself. And so Isaac, through a series of events that are really, really, really good. I mean, all the different people in different professions, his journalist friend, and his artist girlfriend with the mafia, and then his underworld, two-time, not two-timing, but a small-time gangster gets these people together. They discover that robots or artificial intelligences exist.
That toe-tapping gangster.
That toe-tapping gangster. And it may sound, I mean, we're trying to quickly sit here and give you the framework for how the huge scope and how China Mieville is able to make it fit and make it into, I think, something that I would, frankly, I'm a fanboy, and I think I would like to see it as much as any new Star Wars movie on the screen. It's just he has such an epic scale of what he wants to do with this world, and he threads it into a darn good narrative. So all these crazy...
Josh, though, if I could rename the book, though, I think I would rename it Crisis Engine versus Slakemoth Poo.
So we have to talk about that plot point. I did not want to talk about the Slakemoth poo. No, they had some biological explanation about how the Slakemoths eat your dreams, poop your dreams, gives other people nightmares, and makes them more enticing, or something.
Exactly.
Like something like that. And
they crop dust the city. That's gross.
They crop dust it with their fertilizer.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, these you can feel the summer heat, the pressure, the agony in the city. No one wants to talk about how they can't sleep. People scream. The city is a restless city anyway. It's like New York City. It's the city that never sleeps. But you can hear the screams and people disappearing in the middle of the night. It's not the militia.
There are several action scenes when they finally get around to trying to fight these slake moths, and in I'd say 3 or 4 different encounters, the advancing party trying to hurt the moths is just decimated every time. And so, how are we going to defeat these moths? They find the nest. The moths have mated, and there are little baby moths in these little sacks. And Isaac goes in and stomps and smashes them all up. So now he's a baby killer, and he's already kind of murdered some people. But what are we going to do now, Josh? We've got to build a crisis engine in order to defeat the slake moths. And if you want to hear my thoughts on the crisis engine, you should go and listen to the full review at thereignofbooks.com. But I had some issues with the crisis engine because it wasn't what it was originally represented to be when it first came up in the book. So what it ended up being was a massive mental energy amplifier in which the slake moths wanted to come and drink, in which it was too much for them. Back to you, Josh.
It was like a flame where moths who are not that smart, these moths who decimated, which were some awesome action sequences and epic failures by a lot of people. That's one of the best parts about the book. So they can't be defeated, but then what defeats them? Oh, look, pretty light, pretty crisis engine. Fly into it, burn!
Exactly. So they were defeated by their own carnal desires, which ruled them.
So that's kind of funny. And China Mieville may pull from the greatest, ideas in, horror, monster, science fiction, and he uses a lot of what we recognize, but to his advantage to create something wholly unique. I think nothing was alien and dissimilar from our world, but none of it felt boring and old. Everything he created from the city, which again is a great character, to the science they use and all the crazy weapons and species that split water. And the Slakemoth poo. I don't want to give away too much. We've told you the resolution, but it's a tragic story because out of all the epic fights and all the heroics, there's a lot of tragedy where people don't exactly go away happy. So the book doesn't end in a downer. I think it's realistic. I think it's this is probably a bad analogy, but I'll say it anyway. You have people who are probably doing bad things to protect your liberties, right? Is that kind of a is that a contemporary analogy?
I would say so. I would say some murders going on.
So is it for the greater good? Are they justified? So there are morality. There's a morality tale here, but it's all layered in fantasy and steampunk, so you can enjoy it. You don't have to sit here and get twisted up with like, are there snipers killing people across the ocean? Bad people? Who are we to say they're bad? I mean, we make light of it, but that's in the end what these people had to decide: kill some people to save society. So it was good just because it showed you that those actions have consequences.
Read the book and you decide. Is murder the worst thing you can do?
How about murdering somebody by sticking a giant helmet and letting someone eat their brains?
Murder by Crisis Engine.
That's different. All right, so serious book, but we had to not make it sound so serious. It had its moments. Favorite part, John? Pick one favorite part. Like, will any of this book stick with you like forever? You know, I mean, does that story have that kind of impact out of your 3.5 stars? Is there something you'll always remember as like, never saw that before?
Yes, and this is very shallow, so I'm calling myself out. Two things. One, the Slakemoth is the coolest villain, bad guy, whatever you want to call him. One of the coolest I've seen. My number one's the Shrike from Dan Simmons' Hyperion Cantos. Slakemoths are coming in at number 2 as far as books go. So I got them right there in my list of aliens and Predator and all that stuff. So the Slakemoths were awesome. But the part of the book that will stick with me, excuse me, is when the Weaver, I'm not going to tell you what the Weaver is, but when the Weaver is shooting in and out of different dimensions, attacking the Slakemoths. I thought that was brilliant writing.
No, that's a good. The way he introduced it. No, I agree with you. I'm going to steal that one too. My other favorite part was just it's more how the story kind of converged on the glass house. The glass house is a biosphere within the city. It just adds to the layers of what has already been created. You know, different species, different homes. And it's beautiful how the Garuda come in and the robots come in, and it's just this action scene that, you know, again, the author takes the book in a place I wouldn't have expected, and I'm like, man, this is good. I want to see the movie now. Only if Jim Henson does the puppets again. So 5 out of 5 stars. 2 more books in the Bass Lag series. This is what it's called. Bass Lag is the world, and we will get to those some other time. Thanks for joining us. Like John has said, go watch the Rainy Books podcast for the full version, but just go read the book, because you will never find bughead girlfriends that are actually cool besides in this book.
That's right. And you have just been crisis engineered.
All right. Take care, guys.